Ayubowan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good evening from beautiful Sri Lanka. Welcome to the seventh in the AmCham Sri Lanka Premier Series, a series of inspirational and insightful discussions from visionary thought leaders around the world. Now, speaking to us today from Washington, D.C. on women, COVID-19 and the future of work is Elizabeth Romanoff Silva, Assistant Director for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality at the Asia Foundation. Elizabeth is a gender equality specialist with over a decade of expertise working at the intersection of women's and girls' rights and economic growth, education and health, and as Assistant Director for Women's Empowerment at the Asia Foundation, she oversees the Foundation's Women's Economic Empowerment portfolio, including programs to advance women's entrepreneurship, employment, and girls' and young women's educational opportunities. Elizabeth, good morning. It's a pleasure to have you on the AmCham Sri Lanka platform.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy to be able to join this event, and with great thanks to the American Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka for the invitation.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us. Let me hand over to you. Do let me know when you want your slides to be brought up on deck.
Yeah, now would work. And for those of you who may not know, while you're doing that, I may just get started in introducing the Asia Foundation. The Asia Foundation's a nonprofit international development organization committed to improving lives across Asia, and we're informed by deep expertise and commitment. The Asia Foundation actually began working in Sri Lanka in 1954, and we're currently led by our country representative, Dinesh de Silva. The Asia Foundation remains committed to its long-term objectives in Sri Lanka of promoting inclusive economic growth, advancing local democracy and access to justice, helping the survivors of trauma and violence, promoting citizens' participation in the decisions that affect their communities, and working to advance women's leadership and gender equality. A cornerstone of our work at the Asia Foundation is to partner at multiple levels, so with national and subnational governments, the private sector, and local grassroots organizations, including women's organizations, really with a focus on lifting up local voices. And that's certainly true of our women's empowerment, gender equality, and social inclusion work. Specific to women's economic empowerment, supporting women entrepreneurs to start and grow profitable businesses is a key area of focus. And we really work hand in hand with partners to address the challenges that women face, including the legal, regulatory, and the social constraints that hinder women's access to economic opportunities, with a focus on lifting up local voices. Beyond entrepreneurship, we also have a focus on supporting women to enter and advance in the workplace and worker rights in the informal and formal economies. Women's access to sustainable livelihoods, and girls' education and skill building as pathways to economic opportunities. I know many, if not, all of you really understand the imperatives for advancing women's economic opportunities. It's estimated that by 2025, more than $4 trillion could be added to the GDP of the economies in the Asia Pacific if gender disparities in economic opportunities were addressed. And 20 billion could be added to Sri Lanka's economy alone. If you want to go ahead and just move the slides to the next slide. This is an introduction to the Asia Foundation, and we can go to the next slide. Great, thank you. And of course, in addition to economic gains, economic empowerment has the potential to advance women's rights, opportunities, and influence in their families, in their communities, and society at large. But despite mounting evidence, efforts to close economic gender gaps really have lagged. And in Sri Lanka specifically, women's labor force participation in the lead up to the pandemic had actually fallen. Across the region, digitalization and automation are threatening many of the jobs where women are concentrated. And this will affect, women and men differently, automation, digitalization. For example, the significant gaps between women and men studying and working in business and STEM fields means that women are less able to and less positioned to capitalize on market opportunities and emerging advancements, in technology. Not only are we seeing these workforce gender gaps, in technology and other STEM sectors, but we're just seeing the global economy changing and exacerbating those gaps. The Asia Foundation has conducted numerous relevant research reports, including a recent policy brief in collaboration with the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, about the impact of COVID-19 specifically on women in the economy. And just on March 8th, on International Women's Day, we published another report titled COVID-19, the New Normal and Women in the Economy in South Asia, among other reports. And our analysis really highlights how COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on women. And in the context of the pandemic, economic trends suggest that the global economy is moving even faster towards automation. And even for service and hospitality jobs where women are overrepresented, and which we had initially thought may not be as affected in the near term. And at the same time, women are dropping out of or scaling back from the labor force in large numbers due to the pandemic because of increased requirements to care for children, the elderly, or sick family members. As we all know, those prevailing gender norms that position women as family caretakers mean that the trends disproportionately affect women. Increases in demands for unpaid care work has also further widened gender gaps in the labor force, as COVID-19 has really reinforced how caretakers' work is essential. And yet not only is that work highly gendered, but it's also, not being captured in the GDP or counted as officially, as work. The report also uncovers emerging evidence that women workers in women-led micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises are bearing the brunt of the economic downturn of COVID-19 as the sectors hardest hit by the pandemic are also those where women are more likely to be working. Women-led MSMEs tend to be smaller, they're more likely to be informal, and so they're more adversely affected for numerous reasons. And we've seen new data that women's limited access to financing and capital compared to men's prior to the pandemic has also been, further impacted and has affected, liquidity due to the economic repercussions of the pandemic. Women tend to be more likely to work in the informal economy, and so that makes them less able to access safety net and services that the government is providing. Indicators point to a COVID-related boom in tech industries, where, as I mentioned earlier, women are underrepresented. So Southeast and South Asia saw a surge in the use of digital services like e-commerce, food delivery, and online payment due to the coronavirus pandemic. HSBC in Sri Lanka reported 117% growth in fund transfers over its digital platforms. And 75% of customer transactions are now conducted digitally. Uber Eats and Pick Me Food were also used and have been used exponentially to order meals to doorsteps. And that's a huge economic bump. But women workers and entrepreneurs are less able to benefit from those advances. And research in Sri Lanka has pointed to the gender digital divide between women and men. A UNICEF study that was conducted a few years ago found that 77% of early users of the internet are boys. And so that just, starting from a young age makes them less able to both access services and then transition into those, those types of careers later in life. And it's also important to note that the compounding identities, can leave some women double or triply advantaged based on their gender, but other factors, other identity characteristics, including their socioeconomic status. And it's also important to note that people confined to their homes, during the pandemic has also led to a spike in gender-based violence. And there's just such a critical role to play in working to prevent and address gender-based violence, including harassment at home, work, and online, while also ensuring that support services remain adequate. So just to kind of summarize, more women are likely to lose their jobs because of advances in technology. They're in industries and positions that are more likely to get automated. At the same time, they're less able to access business and STEM jobs created as a result of these advancements in technology because they're less likely to be studying and transitioning into these fields. And then these trends have all been exacerbated with COVID. So given this, what type of enabling environment is necessary for women to advance in the workforce and as entrepreneurs, given this changing nature of the future of work in Asia and Sri Lanka specifically. A multi-pronged approach that incorporates policies, practices, and corporate social responsibility is really what's necessary to create that enabling environment and provide women with the tools to succeed. First, I'll discuss what kinds of policies are critical. So we can broadly sum these up as fostering an inclusive workplace, culture, and ensuring pay equity, and enforcing a no tolerance policy for gender-based discrimination and discrimination of any type, including sexual harassment. As I mentioned earlier, one of the major economic and social results of COVID-19 is that women have largely, assumed much of the unpaid care burden. So women of all fields are dropping out of the workforce, in record numbers to help support family members and to care for children who would normally be in daycare or school, as well as parents needing, elder care. And so policies that, work to promote family-friendly work environments with flexible work schedules, diverse childcare options, paid parental leave for both women and men, and male role models that commit to sharing the care burden are really essential. In addition, to acknowledging and responding to the unpaid care burden, companies can also really lead the way in transforming workplace culture so that women have greater advancement opportunities. Women often face implicit and explicit bias that holds them back from professional success. And so, internal policies on anti-discrimination, on gender equality, and preventing sexual harassment are very important and a good first step in creating a woman-friendly workplace. Creating goals for higher numbers of women and other disadvantaged group, on boards and in senior leadership roles are also, important strategies. But policies alone, we know, are not enough. They have to include mandatory training as well for all staff, and accountability for policy violations. Internal policy should really create opportunities for advancement and clear targets for increasing women's participation on corporate boards and in these executive roles. And we also need to ensure that people are paid equally for their work, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, ability status, or other demographic characteristic. So conducting gender and those intersectional audits. And then having a plan to close identified gaps is a best practice. And making salaries public has also really been shown as a promising approach to combat pay inequity. So secondly, I want to talk about the gender responsive business practices that we're seeing that can help more women enter the workforce in those growth-oriented fields and then climb up the management and leadership ladders. So for example, companies can, uncover what kinds of opportunities and challenges women and other disadvantaged groups face internally by conducting gender equality and social inclusion organizational audits to better understand, what's the organizational culture, how many women and other disadvantaged groups are represented at different levels of the company, and to document their perceptions and, their perceived ability to advance, which are all important. Creating women's leadership and mentoring initiatives, both mentor-mentee and also peer-to-peer within companies has also been really effective, while also ensuring equal access of women to other employee advancement and mentoring program, recognizing that you don't want to just have all men in one category and all women in another category. So it's important both to have standalone initiatives for women, but then also make sure that they're equitably represented in other formalized advancement programs. Ensuring promotional recruitment materials include photos of women and men and use language that reflects gender equality is also a very good practice. Elevating women's achievement through industry awards and high visibility events such as technical panels and speaking engagements, ensuring women are equitably promoted to management and senior leadership roles. Companies can also advance women's leadership and prioritize women and other disadvantaged groups as small business owners, for example, in sourcing and partnership policies. So encouraging women-owned small businesses to compete for contracting and subcontracting opportunities, and especially targeting women from disadvantaged groups to participate in new business opportunities is also important. And then in the longer term, taking proactive steps to ensure that reskilling and upskilling programs are reaching women workers, especially those in the informal economy and those who have been displaced as a result of COVID-19's economic downturn, as well as those jobs that are at risk of automation. And these programs can be bolstered with access to childcare support and subsidies. Otherwise, women for caring for children and their families are less able, to participate. And thirdly, corporate social responsibility and employee engagement opportunities. And this can include, providing direct outreach and career advice to students, offering paid internships and fellowships, and partnering with and funding NGOs to design programs that will support girls and women along the life cycle, to encourage, at the younger age, to encourage girls to study STEM and business fields. Then later, programs to sponsor girls and young women to, provide, to study those fields at university. And then providing, paid internship opportunities for female students, and then supporting them to transition into the workforce, recognizing that university to employment pipeline is also really important, and where many young women do, fall off the track, and then helping them move up and advance within companies. Addressing gender-based violence is also a really important tool to help eliminate barriers that prevent women from achieving their full potential. And so with that, I'd like to conclude my prepared remarks and just thank you again for the opportunity to join you all this evening. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for that. It was, as you said, short and concise, but very informative. And I think that's what we need right now. There's so much information out there, so many of these digital resources out there as well. So the smarter we are at packaging what we're sharing, I think the better it is for our viewer. I know you already touched on this, but I just want to go back and ask you. Obviously there's no doubt in any of our minds about the value that women bring to the table. Be it in a boardroom or in entrepreneurship or doing your own thing, but a woman's place in the workforce has always been challenged additionally by the multiple hats, like you said, the gender norms, and it's her role as a woman. As you said, there's the caregiver side of it, and there's the various other hats that she has to don, and she does. What do you think can be done in terms from company perspective, from a corporate perspective? What can we be doing to encourage women to join the workforce, for one thing, given all these challenges? And also on the flip side, like you said, there are so many dropping out of the workforce because of these challenges that are coming up. What about keeping them invested and engaged in the workforce? What are your thoughts on this?
Great. Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And just to start off, I'd like to say that, we're not in the business and don't feel like anyone should be in the business of, forcing women into the workforce or to remain in the workforce. Not all women want to work outside of the home, and that's certainly, their choice. And the way that we like to frame this work is, that it's important to ensure that women are able to decide for themselves, that they have the skills, the tools, and really, the support system. And that enabling environment to access opportunities, equally, to men when they would like to. In terms of policies, I think we've really seen the need for holistic policies to support women. The many hats that women wear, but also supporting male workers to, engage in those caretaking roles, during this challenging time is equally as important. And paid family leave for both men and women is really critical. And it's especially needed for women who are, doubly or even triply advantaged based on their gender and other identities. In addition, subsidies to care centers, providing childcare, to help women adjust to safety to help women who are working, adjust, and then also to help, women-owned businesses stay open during the pandemic remain vital. And in the long term, just in general, high quality, childcare and, preschool programs, especially for low wage workers, are so important to help women remain and re-enter the workforce. And finally, while we do see gender norms that reinforce that caretaking is a woman's role, we do see that shifting, but there's also a lot of work to be done that remains, and men and boys play an important role and really do need to be part of the solution to advance women's economic empowerment.
Great, thanks. As you said, yes, there is a change happening, a change that we are viewing. But I guess there's probably a lot more to go into it. In a way, I guess COVID-19, as much as with all of its challenges, it's also been a massive reset in everybody's lives. And a lot of maybe the roles and gender roles have also had to topple on their heads, because sometimes you've had mom and dad both having to work while at home, and so the division of the labor in the household and childcare and elder care all kind of on its own has kind of got distributed more equitably, I guess, on its own to a certain extent. Elizabeth, what would you think, with all your experience and expertise, what would you see as probably the most or few of the most important things that all of us could be doing, be it civil society, be it the media, be it the public sector or the private sector? What could we all be doing to encourage and advance women's economic opportunities?
It's a big question. And I think it really is a holistic approach of, for companies doing research to understand, where women are working, what kind of challenges they're facing, and, providing supportive services to overcome those barriers and make sure that women are able to both enter into positions and then to advance is specific to companies, I think, one thing.
Elizabeth, specifically with the Asia Foundation, what kind of work specifically are you doing in this area? Are there maybe a few activities or projects that kind of come to mind that will give us a better understanding?
Yeah, and specifically to COVID response. So in addition to, building the evidence base, which I think is important, for companies, for INGOs, for the governments, about the gendered impact of the pandemic on women and girls, which I mentioned, earlier. Our team at the Asia Foundation, we went into action quickly after COVID hit and really, immediately responded, related specifically to women's empowerment and gender equality programming. We launched a Lotus Rapid Response Fund with support from our private Lotus Circle donors, and we programmed more than $1 million in 14 countries across Asia within 6 weeks. So this is all distributed by about April or May of last year. And these were small projects that leveraged existing programs and worked with established networks and partnerships to really immediately provide women and girls with the tools and resources they need. We focus on a few priority areas, including the enormous increase in gender-based violence and economic empowerment, and the intersection of those two areas. So focus both on women entrepreneurs and women in the informal sector. A few relevant projects specific to Sri Lanka that have really worked to respond to COVID include the Initiative for Sustained Peaceful Interethnic Relations Through Economic Development, the INSPIRED program, which works with women and men, micro and small business entrepreneurs in the Eastern Province, and works directly with local partners. And that project, when COVID hit, it conducted a mini survey to understand how men and women-owned businesses, were able to access online content and platforms, and then developed a targeted outreach methodology to really provide men and women with mobile phone reloads to enable them to access online content, and explored an Android-based mobile phone application to support them overcome those digital challenges that we know both men and women owned businesses have faced in during as a result of the COVID pandemic. It is interesting just to look at both the rural and urban digital divide, as well as based on income level, and how it really is more in the rural areas where I think that there has been major challenges just in accessing and, moving businesses online. The Asia Foundation also works at the grassroots level with women's rights organizations, as I mentioned earlier, and provides women with basic needs, support to address domestic violence and, the specific issues that women are facing both, in factories and domestic work as a result of the lockdown. And really went into action immediately after COVID hit as well to ramp up our work in that space. So the Asia Foundation provided substantial support to our longtime local partner, Women in Need, to remotely carry out its counseling and legal service provision to victims of domestic violence through mobile and online options, just recognizing how, the pandemic just really pushed so much online and had to force both the Asia Foundation and also our local partners, I'm sure corporate representatives on the phone as well, to force all of our work to, have more of a digital component to it.
Elizabeth, from a more macro kind of perspective, as an expert in gender equality across across the workspace, how important or how pivotal how important do you see women in the workforce, or women's contribution to the workforce overall? Again, like I said, it may be in the boardroom, it may be in an entrepreneurship, to economic development, especially for a country like Sri Lanka. What are your thoughts on that?
It's so central. It's central, to economic development, in Sri Lanka, in Asia, in, the United States as well, really everywhere. We're seeing that, both in terms of economic disparities and how to increase, economic growth, it's central to have women at the table. And then in addition, I think there's been so much research that has just been shown that businesses perform better when there are more women in senior leadership positions. They make better business decisions. They're more representative of, the community. And it's not just women, it's also, other diverse groups as well, and women who represent diverse groups as well. But the economic case is just, it's so paramount, and it's so clear. Yeah, we like to say it makes good business sense. It's smart business. It makes good business sense, and it also is the right thing to do as well.
Okay, so we have a question coming in from the audience. This is from Dakshini, and Dakshini asks, do you think there is sufficient support for women in the economy from sufficient legal support for women when it comes to gender-based violence and non-verbal abuse that they may face either in the workplace or for the reason of going into the workplace or workforce?
I think it's a challenge. It's really a challenge all over the world to just make sure that there are policies in place that do support women, and that they're implemented as well. And so I think a lot of, oftentimes we do see good policies on paper, but there can be challenges in terms of, the organizational culture and what is interpreted to be acceptable. And so even if there are good policies, within companies, from the government, it really does require, a holistic approach, where women also feel like they will be heard, and they're, and will be listened to in order to, to bring forward, challenges that they're facing. So it is such a complicated, it's really complex. And we're so thrilled to be able to partner with Women in Need, which is just doing such amazing work in Sri Lanka to combat these challenges.
So one of the things that you mentioned as things that can be done going forward, or things that corporates should be doing, was to get involved or tie up with NGOs and as part of their CSR initiatives to work towards this sort of encouraging and encompassing this. As a business chamber, how could we and how could our members get more involved with sort of the kind of projects that the Asia Foundation is doing? Any thoughts on how we could get more involved and what we can do?
Yeah. Well, the Asia Foundation, we do have numerous private sector partnerships Just a few that come to mind, specifically working on our women's empowerment work, or, Google, Visa, MasterCard, Moody's, Estee Lauder, Chanel, Coca-Cola is a partner, long-term partner we've been working with in Sri Lanka on plastic recycling programming. John Keel's Holdings is actually, a company we've been partnering with specifically to address sexual and gender-based violence, and providing support and training to the police to make sure they're sensitized to those gender issues and able to support women who are facing violence. And so there are many opportunities, for the private sector to partner with the Asia Foundation in Sri Lanka, in working on women's empowerment. It is so important, to work at multiple levels, as I mentioned earlier. So, with the government, with the private sector, local community-based organizations. And, we do work at all those levels. And I would, certainly encourage and welcome AmCham members to get in touch with our office and explore ways that we could work together.
Brilliant. So I'm going to just go back to this slide that we shared earlier on. And I just want to ask you to, when it, on the three basic pillars that you've given us here. I think strong workplace policies in terms of it being family friendly, giving a flexible schedule, pay equity, non-discrimination, that's pretty much something that we all talk about, and I guess to a great extent try very hard to kind of make sure happens. In terms of the gender responsive business practices, can you give us a few more sort of maybe practical examples? You said, like, for instance, even peer-to-peer mentoring and mentoree was something like that. Can you maybe share a few more thoughts in terms of how practically companies, we have a few of the human resource people on the group today. Maybe we can share with them what they can go back and kind of get thrown into the mix there.
Sure. Yeah. And I'd also love, I know we have, a number of experts who have joined. So I'd also love to hear, from companies about what they're doing and what they're seeing and, what's working and not working. I think that, really, a whole of company, whole of organization, approach to advance women's leadership and gender equality is really essential. And so, it starts from, as simple as, on job applications, saying, women and other disadvantaged groups are encouraged to apply. Advertising for jobs in areas, oftentimes, women access information differently from men. So going to the places where women are going to see the advertisements, so that they're applying, because if women aren't applying, it's not possible to hire them. And so that's one initial way to just make sure that the candidates that are being reviewed are also diverse. And then I think organizational audits are a really important tool. Doing pay equity audits, making sure that the company is a place where women feel comfortable working, want to work, feel like they can advance, and also going back to gender-based violence, where they feel safe and they're not going to be harassed, they're not going to be limited in their ability to do their work, and to grow professionally. I think are all important aspects. I also think that just having senior leadership reflect the diversity of the community is also important. There's a phrase, you can't beat what you can't see. And so, having women in those leadership roles also helps, younger women, I think, to see their pathway up in the organization.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I've just opened up more questions to the audience, and that includes you on Facebook as well. If there's anybody who would like to add any questions, just go ahead and put it on the comments box, and I'll be happy to take it up with Elizabeth, who's quite happy to share her thoughts and her insights in all of this as well. Elizabeth, anything you did say that you visited Sri Lanka a couple of times when we were talking earlier on. With your travels, I know they were short trips, but I'm sure you would have seen all the many ladies or the many women in Sri Lanka involved in various little entrepreneurial activities. If you, when you visited the golf fort, for instance, you would have seen them with little clothing sales outlets, or a homemade meal, or an ice cream, or a little pickle, or something like that. So actually, it's something that happens quite a lot in Sri Lanka. There's a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit, I think, out there. And food is, of course, the way to everybody's heart. So that's one of the primary areas that women in Sri Lanka get themselves involved in. A nice home cooked meal is something that nobody's going to say no to. What did you notice on your travels? Did you see any of these interesting little tidbits that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, well, as you said, I think that, women are just natural entrepreneurs, and it was clear, in all my travels, just how women are innovating, and women are natural innovators, and they're, they are, starting small businesses, starting large businesses, increasingly, also being involved, in the corporate sphere, which is also exciting to see. And I think, in the informal sector, where we do know that women-owned businesses are more likely to be informal. They're more likely to be in the micro category. And so it is so important, just in terms of ensuring that social safety net to protect women and support them. It is so essential. It's essential for, not all policies need to be focused, especially exclusively on women, but, these kind of policies that help, people in the informal sector, small micro-owned businesses really do disproportionately benefit women. And so it is just so essential to, especially in light of COVID and just the disproportionate impact that these small businesses have faced, to really be prioritizing and recognizing those disparities.
Right. So interestingly, I just saw an article a little while before we got onto this call, where I believe the inaugural Essence of Asia collection of the Asia's 50 best restaurants has curated an Essence of Asia collection, and 3 Sri Lankan restaurants have made it onto this list. 2 of them are actual women entrepreneurships, whereas one is a lot more, an older, much more established restaurant, but 2 of them are women-led. One is a mother-daughter combination, and the other one actually is this lady down in Unawatuna, which was roundabout the area that you visited last. And she does home-cooked meals, and she's made it onto this list. And the journalist, or the reporter, was talking about how when she called her to get a comment, it took a lot of time to track her down to start with, because it's not a registered business or anything like this. And then when she actually spoke to her, how dumbfounded she was, that the appreciation. But I guess it's little encouraging things like this that will help even for her to then take the next step and to see how far she can push the limits. And I guess those are all things that are equally important. That little recognition, as you were mentioning in one of your slides, the recognition and the awarding is always essential as well.
Yes, definitely. Oh, and that's such an exciting story. I'll have to look that up. Yeah, but no, it is so important to show role models, to show, women are doing amazing things, but it's not always told. Their stories are not always told. And so it's just so wonderful, when that does happen. And I think, increasingly it's important to call out those wonderful stories of the difference that women are making. Yeah, all over.
Thanks. So we've had multiple requests to share the presentation slides, because I think that last slide that we just replayed with your suggestions and recommendations is something that's going to be taken pretty seriously across the board. So with your permission, I will go ahead and share that after we finish the session today. That's pretty much all we have time for, and no more scary questions coming in from the audience either, because I think we pretty much covered it all. Thank you, Elizabeth, for taking the time, for preparing the presentation as you did, which was so succinctly and clearly presented to our audience and our members here today. We really appreciate all the efforts being taken by yourself and by the foundation to continue to work towards a truly equitable state across the board. So thank you so much for taking the time as well as for all your efforts. We appreciate it from AmCham here in Sri Lanka.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. It was such a pleasure to join you.
We'll see you again soon. And on behalf of Elizabeth and myself, and of course the AmCham team here at the AmCham Secretariat, thank you for joining us. Have a pleasant evening. Good night and God bless. Bye-bye.